Humanianity, a new religious call. Humanianity, religion for us all. Humanity, now we all can see. Humanity, how much better we can be.
Hi, I'm Bill Van Fleet, and this is Humanianity Conversation number 82, recorded on October 23rd, 2020. It is the 39th recorded conversation with my friend Mike. We continued our long-standing debate on the meaning, acceptability, and justifiability of the extreme solipsistic position that the only thing that exists is that which at the moment is in one's subjective experience, leading to a discussion that seems quite unusual.
Where would you like to start?
Well, we've been working for a long time on a particular issue, and I think we're getting down to rock bottom, so to speak. And and it would really be good, I think, to see if we can't, come to final agreement about something here.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's getting Zeus here. Keep going.
The problem that you are presenting that is difficult for me to.
Sorry, hold that thought. My dog Zeus was getting into trouble. The thing that you're having trouble with, the idea, I guess, that I'm presenting.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting for things to calm down there.
Sorry.
It is the issue that you maintain that you believe that the odds are greatest that when you are not thinking about your wife, she does not exist.
Well, the odds are greatest. That is something that I'm not able to answer. But if I was to, so that like if this was like an exam and I was speaking to a philosophy professor, that's kind of like what I'd say. Now, if you're going to ask me what I actually believe, I got to be honest with you, it would probably be close to the answer that I gave the professor. I do not feel comfortable confirming or denying something that is, in a sense, which at least what I believe, to be completely within my imagination. The idea of something existing when I'm not thinking about it is almost, to me, non sequitur-ish. It's like an oxymoron. It's the opposite of a tautology. You cannot not think about something. So I have a lot of problems with it.
Yeah, but see, there are difficulties there. And by the way, you're kind of sunk pretty low.
Am I? Sorry. That better?
Yeah, that's better. If we go back, let's go back to the original the question. Do you believe that when you are not thinking about or perceiving your wife, that she does not exist?
There are the main issue that I have with that question is that it is definitively impossible for me to consider a situation or for me to ever experience a situation where I'm asking myself, does my wife exist without thinking about her? I have to be thinking about her in order to even in order to even consider the question.
Yeah, but see, right away, that's addressing a different question. That's addressing a question. Can I think about something that I'm not thinking about?
But that question does seem relevant to my ability to answer the question.
I don't see how it does. It has a little bit to do, I think, with word usage, like the word exist. What does the word exist mean?
Well, I think the word, what does exist mean, even applies to my wife. And this is something I was thinking about this week as I was thinking about our conversation last time.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of my wife's existence even applies to, in terms of what does that actually mean, even applies to when I am thinking about her and I am talking to her and I am interacting with her, in addition to, and perhaps even more relevant to our question here, than when I'm not thinking about her, does she exist? So I think to answer that question, what does it mean to exist if you're not thinking about something? We have to ask the question first, what do we mean by existence when we are interacting and talking? So what does it mean when I can say, well, you exist because I'm talking to you, you're here with me, you're interacting with me? So,
well, but that's that's saying that has to do with what does it mean to exist when I'm talking with you and so forth. That's almost making an assumption about the word exist that's already embedded. I do believe that it is a difficult question. The word exist means different things depending upon what it applies to. Do trees exist? Does democracy exist? Does North Carolina exist? All of those things are the meaning of the word exist is going to have to change depending upon what it is used in association with. And so when we're talking at the rather, quote, deep level, epistemologically, then how one would define the word exist as applied to your wife, not your wife when you're thinking about her, or your wife when you're not thinking about her, but your wife.
see,
yeah, go ahead.
I question the idea that you just presented of your wife without thinking about her. I think we have to examine if that has any even validity. if it has any meaning. My wife when I'm not thinking about her. What does that mean?
Well, it means that the same thing as the things behind me exist, or my car exists.
But you just thought about your car and you just thought about the things behind you.
Yeah, but the meaning of the word exist as it is typically used, rather than giving it a very strange or bizarre meaning, as it is typically used, is pretty definite and explicit. My car exists, whether I am thinking about it or not.
Well, this is, I think, the source of our difficulty in coming to agreement. I maintain, as I said before, that you are making and I maybe without realizing it, you are making an implicit assumption with when you make that statement. Well, colloquially, the word is used simply, my car exists. Within that statement, if you accept it, there is an implicit belief that, to my knowledge, has never been ever been shown, even through argument, to be valid, that there is existence in some type of manner that is independent of your subjective experience.
Mm-hmm.
And
by the way, you're sinking down.
Am I again? I'm sorry.
There you go. There we go. Yeah, that's what we're again. So another way of saying it is that the position that you are adopting is that nothing exists except your subjective experience.
That's what seems to be true to me when I when I think about it very carefully.
Yeah. Now, in my mind, there is some kind of
may I just edit what I just said?
Okay.
That's my own personal belief when I go through the argument. Now, I think that I'm not confident enough to say that in any type of definitive way, but what I can say more definitively is that it is impossible to show the opposite of my belief is true.
Well, that's a separate question.
I think they're related.
Related, but separate.
Separate, but related.
Yes. So let's see, so there's the question posed to you: do you believe that anything exists other than your subjective experience? And
most likely not. That's my own personal belief.
Yeah, most likely not. In other words, the probability is greater that the only thing that exists is your subjective experience. Now, is that because of the way that you are using the word exist?
No.
Well, wait.
I don't think so.
Wait, let me see. I think that it is impossible for me to believe that the only thing that exists is my subjective experience. I know that I am talking with another person by Zoom. I know that if I get up and walk out of this room, what I will find. And the answer to what I will find does not change just because I ask myself the question, well, what will I see when I walk out of the room?
That's a different question.
What?
To make I think you're making an invalid assumption that, well, simply because the only thing that exists, quote unquote, in the way I'm using that word, is my subjective experience, that means I have full control over it. That's a separate question.
Well, I was not talking about control over anything.
Well, I think you were, in the sense when you said, if I understand correctly, it seemed like you were implying that, well, if the only thing that exists is my subjective experience, then if I believe Big Bird can fly, then Big Bird can fly. That's not so. I would say that's a separate question.
Well, wait a minute. Say that again. I'm sorry.
I think that you were implying, well, if nothing exists beside your subjective experience, then I can kind of, if I believe that, Big Bird can fly or I can fly, that means I should be able to, it's like I'm in a lucid dream. I should be able to start flying. I think those are two separate questions.
Well, no, I don't follow that. See, I believe that if I believe that I can fly, that is an inaccurate belief.
But that doesn't negate, in my opinion, my belief or a belief that the only thing that exists is your subjective experience.
Well, the concept of a belief being inaccurate or, quote, untrue implies that there is something more than one's subjective experience and one's beliefs that are coming into awareness in that subjective experience.
Can you show? So I know you can. I know I've heard the argument many times that you believe substantiates that statement and that claim, but that doesn't.
What is that argument, by the way?
I think it's the argument that, well, if I believe that I turn the corner and there's a supermarket and there's not, well, I was wrong. And that implies that there's some independence between a subjective experience and something else, and that something else being existence, reality, independent of my subjective experience.
Yeah, that would be pretty correct.
So to me, that does not substantiate any kind of claim about anything outside subjective experience, because the prediction, both the prediction that's made and the experience that you have that negates the prediction, are both still happening in your subjective experience.
Yes, but it can imply something. It implies that there is a reality that is independent of my subjective experience, such that my subjective experience is a model of that reality, and that model can be correct or incorrect or pretty correct or somewhat correct.
Okay. How can that ever be tested? I mean, how can you test if the model, other than, like you said, with predictions and it being inaccurate, or predicting and it being accurate, because that is all happening inside your subjective experience, how is that anything other than a model of how your subjective experience will react? I don't see it to have anything to do. I don't see how you can make that jump from going from, well, because this is happening in my subjective experience, therefore there must be something outside of it. I don't see it. That's the big leap.
A model is something that is constructed for its usefulness. And its usefulness is the ability to predict, the ability to avoid having the experience of making a mistake. Yeah, something happened.
Okay. It's me. I've been having some trouble with my internet today. And I just figured out, however, how to use the hotspot on my phone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you were saying? I know. It's like me too. I don't remember. It's nothing about age. I'm not even sure what we were saying. You were talking. I was talking about the idea that I'm not able to join you in a leap I think you're making, such that because a prediction is wrong inside your subjective experience, that in any way reflects the existence of anything outside your subjective experience.
Well, how do you explain being wrong?
That's a very good question. I do not know. Yeah, I think the right answer to that question is I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly why I would be wrong. It sure does appear on the surface in many, many ways that there's something noumenal. There's something outside of my subjective experience. But there's a lot of things that look a certain way throughout history and appear to be absolutely incontrovertibly true. And then upon deeper thinking or upon certain discoveries are turned out to be, well, I know it appears that way, but it's really not that way. So the fact that it appears a certain way very strongly is not a good enough answer.
Well, it is not that way means that it is some other way.
Well, what I mean by it is I meant my belief in existence outside my subjective experience. And one of those it could be it doesn't exist at all. But even besides that, going back to what we were talking, you asked me a question. You posited, you said, I think this has to do with what we're talking, how we're using the word existence. And as you were giving me examples, I could agree with that. I think part of this might be the way we're defining the word existence.
Well, that's what I've been saying earlier.
Yeah, and I didn't believe that in the beginning, but as you just talked about it a little bit more, I'm warming up to that idea. Mm-hmm. I do think that when you use the word existence, you are kind of implicitly, explicitly, axiomatically, almost defining it. Yeah. Well, existence is something independent.
You're breaking.
It's an automatic, intuitive belief.
You're breaking up.
It's my phone.
Mm-hmm.
Am I better? Am I
Yeah.
better now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That it is, if this keeps happening, I will, you give me 15 minutes, I'll drive somewhere and I'll get a better connection.
Mm-hmm.
That was a complicated idea. I was about to, let me reform it in my head. I don't remember what I was going to say, damn it. But in any case, I'm warming up to that idea. I think, or I remember what I was going to say. I think when you use the word existence, you are just axiomatically, just intuitively using it to mean what it means in popular terms, colloquially, yes, which is something independent of what you believe, your subjective experience. I certainly accept that definition. I know about that definition. I've used it in the past, and I use it now, and I'll probably use it in the future. But similar to other ideas that I took and believed in axiomatically, as I read and learn a lot more of ideas that have been happening over the past 100, 200, 300, 1,500 years, as I think about my own experience more deeply as we have these conversations, even though I'm aware of the definition that you're using for existence, I'm questioning its validity from a certain point of view, let's say.
Well, validity, we can't really, a definition we can't say is valid or not. A definition is just a decision to use a word in a particular way. Now, it may be based on beliefs that are valid or invalid. For instance, let's see, you froze there pretty badly.
Yep.
So the connection is really poor. Can you hear me?
Is it? I can hear you, yes.
Uh-huh.
I can hear you.
Yes, right. Well, see, you broke up and then now I lost my train of thought. Has to do with a definition is not valid or invalid. A definition is just a proposal to use a word in a particular way, but it is indeed connected to beliefs. For instance, if I define a unicorn, and I happen to believe that they exist, then that would be one thing, but I could define a unicorn and believe that they don't exist.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that makes, in that situation, which I think mirrors, is an analogy to the situation we're talking about now, the questions we're talking about now, the definition does matter. If you happen to believe that existence is different than the accepted definition, then I think it is reasonable to consider and question an arbitrary definition, and whether or not you accept it or should use it, or if it's valid or not. Because let me put it to you this way, Bill. You basically just said a definition is arbitrary. Okay, so that means for anybody to give it validity, there's got to be belief in it. It's arbitrary.
No, wait. I'm saying validity is not a descriptor of definition. unless you're
Okay.
saying that I believe the definition of such and such is so and so according to most dictionaries. In other words, or I believe that the definition that is most used for such and such is so and so. That's a belief about the use of the definition, but it's not the definition itself. You're
Did I freeze? So right now I'm connected on my Wi-Fi, and let's see if that's any better. I'm hearing two different things. What I heard before, I thought, was you presented the idea that I thought a definition was arbitrary.
What do you mean?
It reflects it in the sense that it reflects what most people believe in essence.
No.
So if most people, okay, so
No.
what then what is a definition then? I don't understand what you were saying.
Definition is just an agreement to use a word in a particular way.
Isn't that agreement arbitrary?
What does it mean, arbitrary?
It's the result. It's arbitrary in the sense that it's the result of a group decision that is whimsical and not necessarily reflective of anything other than the group's opinion.
Well, no, it doesn't have to do with the group's opinion. It is just an agreement. I agree that it's arbitrary in that it's an agreement to use a word in a particular way, whereas that word can be used in other ways. It's just a matter of how we agree to use it. And indeed,
okay,
most words have more than one definition, meaning that people have defined the word in different ways. But so one could use definition number one or definition number two or definition number three. And so it's not that one of those is correct. Now
before you move on, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So you're saying the use of the definition is arbitrary, but the definition itself is not.
No, I don't think I was saying that.
Okay, then I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean by definition.
The definition is an agreement between two or more people, or just a decision within one's own mind to use a word in a particular way. And a definition basically is in the format of X, which is being defined, is true of all Y, of which, I don't mean that, X means all Y of which Z is true. So the
okay, can we take that for a minute? X for all Y in which Z is true.
Wait a minute, say it again.
So X means for all Y in which Z is true. Is that what you said?
Yes, I believe so. X,
okay.
X is to mean all of Y of which Z is true.
Okay. Now, how is that not arbitrary?
Well, it is.
Okay, so therefore, can you say that definitions are arbitrary?
Yes.
Okay.
But one can also take a look and say, well, this definition is more useful for that than that for our purposes.
Okay. So then if a definition is arbitrary, this goes back to my claim that I made earlier, that it is reasonable, if a definition is arbitrary, it is reasonable to argue, firstly, that its validity depends upon the popularity and how many people's opinion on whether they accept it or not.
Yeah, but you're applying the word validity to it, and it should not be.
All right, let me use what I use. What I mean by valid, forget means the truth, one's belief in the definition.
Whoa.
Typically, what?
Belief in the definition. What does that mean?
Here, this is what I'm maintaining. If something is arbitrary, okay, let's take this idea then. If something is arbitrary, then I'd say almost by definition, you have to consider belief when you're considering something that's arbitrary.
I don't know what that means at all.
If something is arbitrary, well, let me say it this way.
What do we mean by arbitrary?
Arbitrary means, I'm not going to look it up in the dictionary, I'm just going to say it, but I think what I'm trying what I'm using by the word, what I mean by the word arbitrary is probably the actual dictionary definition of it. But arbitrary would mean the truth of an idea depends upon it's what I said earlier. I only got like 4 hours, 5 hours of sleep last night. That's why I'm not thinking very well today.
Well, you've introduced two different truths.
Well,
I
had defined arbitrary previously in a way I really liked. I'm trying to remember what I said. Arbitrary is the idea that a definition's acceptance, because we're talking about definition, depends primarily upon somebody's opinion rather than anything else.
Not someone's opinion, someone's wish.
A wish, okay, wish, preference. I could say opinion, wish, preference.
Well,
yeah,
opinion.
It's a wish. It's a right. Okay, opinion could agreed. Opinion is the wrong word.
Opinion.
Wish is a better word.
Opinion usually means belief.
Yeah, it's a wish, a belief, an opinion. The key idea being that is entirely within one's subjective experience.
No.
How is somebody's belief, opinion, or wish outside their subjective experience?
In the first place, you've used the 3 words, belief, opinion, and wish. And those are belief and opinion I equate, but wish is something different.
Agreed. Let's go with opinion and belief. So by arbitrary, I mean the acceptance of a definition depends upon, and only depends upon, and necessarily depends upon only somebody's opinion and belief.
Well, it's dependent upon a person's wish. And of course, our wishes are produced by our beliefs.
Okay, fine. I would agree. So you then call the beliefs and the opinion a derivative of somebody's wish.
For instance,
The wishes and your belief and opinion generates a wish and you believe in it, but it's still happening in your subjective experience.
For instance, it is my belief that using the current definition will be more useful, and therefore it is my wish to use that definition.
Okay, agreed. So beliefs and opinions are derivatives of wishes and they generate, but they're still,
they're not necessarily derivatives.
It's still in your subjective experience.
Not necessarily derivatives.
Okay, forget the idea of derivative, but it's still in your subjective experience. Okay, so that's what I mean by arbitrary. So arbitrary, so let's continue the word wish. That's fine, because I'm still going to be able to show the same thing. Arbitrary means the acceptance of a definition depends on what a person or a group of people wishes it to be.
For various reasons.
Whatever the reasons are. But the key idea here, and the reason why arbitrariness opens up a definition to debate, is the fact that it's all happening inside of multiple individuals' subjective experience. Your subjective experience is just as valid as mine, just as valid as anyone else's. So I think it reasonable and completely permissible.
That's not necessarily true.
What is not?
If you have schizophrenia, your belief system is, I think, less reliable than mine.
According to who?
According to those who have studied it. And see, I cannot use the position that nothing exists other than what I'm currently experiencing or thinking about. I cannot, to me, that is totally non-usable.
The only thing that makes the schizophrenic's experience I forgot the word you used, invalid or unreal or unhealthy or unacceptable, is the fact that most people are not in the same state.
Well, I think also that, and I may not have done a good thing by using the term schizophrenia. That introduces a whole bunch of other stuff, but
yeah.
It has to do with some individuals are much more prone to make mistakes than others are, and one of the examples of that is that set of individuals who are considered to have schizophrenia, but there can be other people who are prone to make mistakes also. And very often, the mistakes that they make are by virtue of them having a belief system that is specifically contains a lot of beliefs that most people have found do not work, i.e. that they make mistakes, but for some people that tendency toward making mistakes by virtue of their belief system is not evident to them.
In that claim, and in a lot of claims you're making, is this implicit idea, which I think you just said. You cannot proceed on the idea that that there is no kind of numinal existence. There is not necessarily an existence outside someone's subjective experience. And I think that claim has a tremendous amount of merit. I've just never heard an argument yet, no matter what philosopher I've read over the past 1,000 years, that can really, through argument or evidence. For evidence is, I know evidence is impossible. So let's just show an argument. It's never, I've never heard it. And even the argument about what I said before, predictions and in the accuracy of the predictions, that still does not, it's not in any way say anything, or even can even by inference of anything outside your subjective experience. So when you say to me, it's very difficult to proceed without, this implicit acceptance of existence outside your subjective experience, it's just as hard for me to proceed with the acceptance of it. Just it's for me saying, well, existence outside your objective experience exists is almost literally like me saying, it's like humanity saying, 2,000 years ago, well, of course the earth is flat. I mean, just, I can't proceed with the idea that space is curved. Like, that's just, what? That's ridiculous. It's as hard for me. And if we were talking 2,000 years ago about the earth being flat or space being curved, I might say something like, well, can you argue or show it's not flat, or that the fact that it is flat, rather? And if I was sophisticated enough and I'd think about it differently, and if I was smart enough, I could refute all the arguments. And at minimum, I'd be able to say, well, the earth might be flat, but we can't know. And this is kind of exactly what I'm saying here. All I'm saying is you cannot be certain of that. And so it's so hard for me to proceed in the same way it's difficult for you to proceed.
Yeah, certain. You see, when you
and that's the only thing that, again, it's that's what solipsism is. You cannot be certain of anything outside your subjective experience.
You can't be certain of anything in your subjective experience. Well,
that goes to, I think, some of my own unique ideas that even within philosophy, even a professional philosopher might say these are atypical. I think most of the things I talk about here about solipsism maybe accept the idea of how I'm defining a priori. Most philosophers would know about it. If you study certain philosophers, they would say, well, okay, I'm familiar with these arguments. It's when I start talking about not being assured of your own subjective experience, that's when it gets a little fuzzier. And some philosopher would say Mike's crazy. But I maintain, and I've never been able to get deep enough. We've never been able to agree to the point where I can start making this argument. But I think the only thing you can be sure about are those things which are a priori. And I know we can't do a priori. And even the way I'm defining a priori, I'm defining certain characteristics of a priori knowledge that is not popularly accepted, but I still maintain they're true. But we've never been able to get there. So, but
I guess the word sure again, and that has to do with the probability of something being so.
Correct.
And the probability.
No. You just use it. You just used it again. You said has to do with the probability of being so. What I mean, that's not what I mean by sure. What I mean by sure is my own subjective feeling of confidence that I
Confident.
have,
Yes.
but subjective. It's a feeling I have
Yeah.
of right. That's all it is.
Yes.
Doesn't have to do with the probability of it being accurate or not with respect to something outside my feeling. It's just a feeling I have.
They are related concepts.
How?
The more probable you consider something to be, the more sure or confident you feel about it.
Run that by me one more time. Just say it exactly, as close as you can.
The more
probable
that you believe.
That's the word I was looking for, that you believe. It's not it's the belief you have in it that is related to your confidence.
Because the thing is, you can find out that your belief as to how probable something was is not the same as somebody else's belief as to that probability. You can find out that the probability is actually considered to be quite high or quite low and different than what you initially thought.
But that data point about the probability that somebody else has in something is completely benign and has no impact on your belief of your level of confidence until you believe something about it. There's no way around existence outside your subjective experience. It can't be. Even that breaks down. That example, the probability that somebody has is simply has no impact on my confidence level until I assign some belief about it. So here again, it's not the probability or difference of opinion that's causing any difference, a change in my confidence. It's an intermediary step of belief, which is in your subjective experience.
I wonder if there is some way that we can get beyond this. I think it's almost like a circle that we are in. I'm not sure that we are saying something new. Occasionally, I think we do.
I brought that up before. And here's my theory about why this is happening. I think that you and I both, I think there's either one or two things happening. I think one possibility is that you or I are thinking about these ideas haven't evolved substantially over the weeks we've been talking, so we just keep saying the same thing. And the other possibility is we keep going in circles because there is actually a fundamental incompatibility, even with how well we understand these ideas. There's a fundamental incompatibility between them that they can't fit together.
Well, I agree that that the belief that the only thing that exists is that which is in your subjective experience is incompatible with my belief that there is existence independent of my subjective experience.
Yeah, I raised my finger because I was going to challenge whether or not that's really what I mean. Because I said before that, solipsism is really representative of the idea of the level of confidence you can have in anything outside your subjective experience. But I'm getting to the point where I'm almost comfortable arguing that. I think that it is, and I feel like that's the only, I feel like I have to take that position because of how implicit and axiomatic the belief that you have that there is existence outside your subjective experience, that the only, that it's so, that belief that you have in that axiom to me is so it's almost irrational to have that level of confidence in it, that I actually feel comfortable saying no. Like I feel comfortable saying no, reality doesn't exist outside your subjective experience because you cannot show it does. But I mean, I just want to say it again. Solipsism does not mean that. Solipsism is simply the idea and talked about the level of confidence you can have. I'm taking it to another level. I'm taking it to the level to say, no, it doesn't exist.
Okay. But yes, that's right. You're saying that in your belief system, in your mind, so to speak, it seems much more probable that nothing exists other than what you're concurrently experiencing in your subjective experience. Then, and I believe that the probability is much, much higher in the other direction. That's different than whether one can demonstrate it or not. Now, I think it is a demonstration. Well, it's really part of the meaning of what we're talking about, to say that we can make mistakes. In other words, if I can see something and then come to the conclusion that what I saw was not really there, or believe something and later come to the conclusion that what I believed was not so, then to me, there is reality that exists right alongside my subjective experience.
Okay.
And that my subjective experience is a model of it. But that model is not completely accurate. And so it's a part of a basic way of thinking.
Yeah, you know, I try to maybe try to I'm getting to the point where I might be able to figure out how to communicate this in a different way. Yeah, I just I don't I'll clearly. For you to, I'm just going to say, let me say it like this. And I think I've heard you say this before. It's like we exist in a bubble. And everything we ever experience or perceive is in essence an image on that bubble.
I'm not following. But go ahead.
To claim, you can make the claim. That's absolutely fine. But to claim any to have to have a level of confidence, to have a strong amount of confidence in anything other than what you're seeing in that bubble requires imagination. And to equate imagination, to equate your, which is also inside the bubble, to equate your imagination with something that is in some way outside the bubble, which even the idea of something being outside the bubble is almost axiomatic, because it's the tautology. Everything is in the bubble. Nothing else other than that ever. It's just it's definitively, that's the definition. There is, all that exists is the bubble.
I don't agree.
What you are doing is, here's my opinion. You are presented, you have an idea in your imagination that something exists outside your subjective experience and your perceptions and your beliefs and everything that's happening in your subjective experience. And you have, for I think good reasons, come to believe that your imagination is somehow reflective of something outside your subjective experience. But if you think about it, it's not.
No, I don't think that's that I would agree with that. But it would have to do with two different uses of the word imagination, I think, or something like that. But I can't do a good job of parsing that.
You know, let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen the movie? I know this is going to sound, if anybody watching this is going to sound so trite and commonplace. Have you ever seen the movie The Matrix?
No, but I kind of have the idea. I understand that.
It has to do with the idea of virtual reality being engaged inside a person from birth. Actually, technically, it's before birth. And the kind of like the question becomes, for the purposes of our discussion here, you know, from our point of view, we recognize that the person is in VR. But for the person in VR, they would claim that VR constitutes existence, and that things exist within VR outside of their subjective experience. I mean that simple, even thought experiment just shows. I think that's an argument. I don't think there's any argument for existence outside your subjective experience, but that's an argument for solipsism.
Can you say it again?
If you grow a person inside of virtual reality such that not only when the baby is born they're in VR, but they are actually this is what the Matrix is, they are actually grown inside of VR. If you kind of,
you're sinking.
Sorry. So then let's go inside of VR for a minute and go inside of this person's perceptions. This person has, inside of VR, they have subjective experience, right? And they see a car go by, and they see the trees go by, and they see everything else happening. And they say to another person inside of VR, well, of course there's existence. I mean, you know, I can predict if the car is going around the block and there's going to be a Chick-fil-A there, and I go around and it's not. Obviously, the virtual Chick-fil-A, which we know is VR, actually exists. But the only reason why they have confidence that degree in existence outside subjective experience is because it is impossible for them to step outside their subjective experience and see that they're in VR. The same thing applies to this. We are not capable of stepping outside our subjective experience to see what, quote unquote, is really going on. It is impossible. I don't want to introduce the word a priori, but I could, but I won't. That's what so if you watch the movie The Matrix, that movie, especially the first third of it, really shows that in a very poetic, grabbing way, which is very reflective. And you might want to check out the movie.
Well, but it is based upon the idea that there is a reality that is independent of one's subjective experience.
Well, of course it is. That's what makes the movie good. That's what creates the drama. What creates the drama in the film is that these people are in VR, they're slaves, they don't know it, and then here's the real world, here's actual existence. But nonetheless, that's a valid thought experiment, even though it's kind of, it's a popular term to say, oh, you're just in the Matrix, and it's kind of, it's poo-pooed a lot, but nonetheless, that really is a valid thought experiment. Because that's something that I believe one day could happen. In 1,000 years, if society doesn't blow itself up, I think it's realistically possible for virtual reality to be so perfect, you can't tell the difference between what we would consider our experience now and us plugging into a computer. And when that happens, I think the idea of solipsism is going to become that much more prominent in culture. Because that's a strong argument for it.
Yeah, and I really do not agree. But there are all sorts of reasons why I don't agree with that idea.
Why? Well, what idea don't you agree with?
Well, I mean, there are things having to do with, we've got 7 billion of us on the planet and so forth, and why we would decide to make a human being who was deceived from birth or something like that. Or it also gets into the issue of whether artificial intelligence is actually conscious or not, and that gets into the whole philosophical problem of the existence of consciousness and so on. So there are all sorts of complex things. So I don't think it's a useful introduction. The virtual reality thing, I don't think is a useful,
Wow.
It may be useful in certain ways, but it gets back again to the question. Here we have an individual who has subjective experience, and there's the question as to whether there is anything that can be said to exist other than that person's subjective experience. So I believe that you exist even when I'm not talking with you.
I appreciate that. When shit, wait a minute. This is what happens when I'm tired. I can lose my train of thought very easily. Shit. I don't remember what I was going to say. God damn it.
It'll come back.
No, it won't. It'll come back a half hour later, and I'll say, oh, that's what I was going to say. You said, I can't accept that because you brought up objections, and then you brought up something else. And it's okay. I don't remember what I was going to say, but let me just say this. Granted, I think there's some ethical and moral considerations that might cause us to question whether that's ever really going to happen. Are we ever going to grow people from, are we ever going to conceive people in VR and have them, you know, is that going to happen? Okay, granted. But I do think it is definitely reasonable to state that virtual reality and the biological machine interface will get so good that being inside of a virtual world will be indistinguishable from not being inside that world. Would you agree with that?
Well, I really don't know, and I have no expertise such that I would think that whatever I believed had an unusual validity to it. But I think, see, what I get back to, I guess there's an ethical issue here as to whether I should whether I should believe that there is something beyond my subjective experience and my beliefs,
interesting,
or whether I should not. And I believe that I should. And I believe that what I do makes a difference. I believe that I can cause pain, suffering, disability, and early death, or not. And my ethical system is wanting to reduce as much as possible pain, suffering, disability, and early death. And so I believe that there is an external reality, and that my beliefs about it are my modeling of it to a greater or lesser degree of accuracy, and that it is important to increase that degree of accuracy so that I have a lower probability of making mistakes. And because mistakes may lead to something better, but usually lead to something worse.
It's interesting because I think the ethical question of what we're talking about has certainly crossed my mind lots of times. And I could understand how the ethical system of beliefs that you have in terms of rational ethical living and whatnot really does depend upon the idea of some kind of existence independent of someone's subjective experience. I understand that. I would, however, say that.
Well, no, I think, well, I think that my ethical belief, well, it is impossible for me to have the outlook that you describe yourself as having. For me to believe that nobody exists other than me, and that anybody who appears in my subjective experience is just there just existing during that time, and is gone and does not exist when I'm not thinking about them. That's not possible for me to believe.
Maybe this does have to do with what we mean by existence. You're getting into the idea, I think you are equating, maybe we do have to talk about existence more. You are equating differentiation, subject object differentiation as analogous, as necessarily true for existence. In order for something, in order for something to exist, that's really, I think, if you kind of break down how existence works for you and what it means to exist. It means that there needs to be you, the subject. It's called differentiate, subject-object differentiation. It needs to be you and then an object external to you. And that object that's external to you has to be external in the sense of outside your subjective experience. Now, I kind of get that. I think subject-object differentiation is necessary even in a solipsistic point of view. But here's where I'm going with this. I can believe that nothing exists outside of my subjective experience, and still act and still choose to act ethically, still choose to try to get us to Mars, still choose to be nice to people, still choose to believe in people, still choose to, I can believe in anything I want. They're two independent ideas. But what a solipsist will not do is say that existence necessitates a subject-object differentiation such that the object is outside my subjective experience. It's enough for a solipsist to say existence, the minimum that's necessary for existence is subject-object differentiation within my own subjective experience. It's the belief in the idea that within my subjective experience, there's me experiencing something and something else. Whether or not, for a solipsist, that differentiation only happens in your subjective experience. For an empiricist, it happens their subjective experience and then something outside of it. They can still live the same way. There's no reason why you can't live the same way. It's just a solipsist will say, well, existence is subject-object differentiation, but it's still happening in my subjective experience. That's all the solipsist is saying. The solipsist says, I can't know if that object's outside my subjective experience or not. I only can know that I know for sure it's in my subjective experience. I can guess and have differing beliefs about whether or not it's outside. So this idea of subject-object differentiation is key.
The it makes it sound like it's the same thing.
What do you mean by it?
What you were saying, it.
The object. The object.
It was out in your subject.
The object. The object. The object.
It was.
The object is it.
It was in your subjective experience and outside of your subject.
No. The difference between this is really, I think, nails the difference between your definition of existence and mine and a solipsist. A solipsist, in both definitions, in any kind of definition of existence, there's subject-object differentiation. There's the idea of me, the subject, and something else, the object. Because the object is not the subject, it exists independent of me. Now, solipsist. We've
introduced subject and object, two new terms, and embedded in them are certain assumptions being made, and they're not defined. So,
please, let's do it. What's not defined for you?
Well, we haven't defined clearly how we're using subject and object.
Okay. I'm going to talk about this without introducing posteriori and a priori. I can do it. Let's start with the idea of separation. Can we accept that's axiomatic?
What?
Separation. A is not B. It's something else.
I'm not following. I don't know what the implications of those words are.
Well, in order, the idea of subject-object differentiation has to do with the idea of difference. Something is different than something else. Separation. That's what constitutes a separation. So, what can we accept that axiomatically the idea of something being different than something else and what that means?
I think so.
Okay, so let's consider that axiomatic. So let's consider these two things that I'm claiming are separated. One is subject and one is object. So in order for us to, let me start this way. Let's start with subject in the context that I'm talking about it. The subject is the conscious, can I use the word consciousness? Can we consider it axiomatic that I know what I means?
No, and the reason for that is it is a very interesting supernatural belief.
Okay, then I won't say that then.
And by supernatural,
can I use the word subject as me and you?
No, because those are undefined terms.
Okay, then I have an objection in general to this line of thinking. You have used the word you and me and I. I have used the word you and me and I axiomatically for the past years we've been talking about. To suddenly now claim, I guess I would like you to substantiate why suddenly we cannot use those words when I start talking about subject in subject-object differentiation.
We can use them, but we would need to define them. We have all sorts of ways of using words.
Okay, then I can do it then.
See, I wasn't able to finish my sentence.
I'm sorry, I got excited. Go ahead, but I figured it out. Go ahead.
Well, go ahead.
Subject is analogous to subjective experience. It's your perceptions. That's the subject. It's that which is experiencing your subjective experience. That's the subject. Is that valid for you?
Well, it sounds like a customary use. I'm not sure.
How about self? Could I use the word self?
Well, see, that's the point. I think some would say that the entity called the self is something that in no way can be pointed to, and is very poorly defined.
How about this? How about by subject, I mean the person or the thing doing something? Is that valid for you?
Well, that assumes that there are such things as persons.
Well, what word would you use in place of person? Could I use subjective experience? So when I talk about subject-object differentiation, the subject is your perception. It's that which is in your it's the actual perception itself. It's the subjective experience. It's the, in philosophical terms, it's the qualia, it's called. It's your subjective experience. It's your perception.
Well, let's go with that for the
okay.
moment.
For something to exist, then you have to have the subject, right? I mean, you have to have something that You have something to receive the perception. You have to have, there's something needs to experience for example, to talk about the idea of subjective experience without talking about something receiving that experience, it is kind of like a non sequitur.
How many of those are there?
Probably, I don't know. I mean, for sure, mine. That's the only thing I could say for sure. There's mine.
See, yeah. What is most probable? That you are the only person in the world?
Has nothing to do with that. I'm not able. This is a key. Subject-object differentiation is key to this idea of how we're defining existence, and it's something that if we don't explore, I guess it's what I'm saying. This is a line of thinking that's new, that we can come to agreement about, but we have to go through the argument together. We can't, to start going back to, well, you're the only person that has that experience. It's not. I've already talked about that. Yeah, for sure. I can state for sure that I only know for sure there's one subjective experience, mine. Anything else is my imagination. But that's not relevant here. What's really relevant here is...
Oh, it's not. Okay. Oh, well, go ahead.
Subject-object differentiation and the way we're using that idea to define existence is subtly different between a solipsist and a non-solipsist. And that is, I think, really emblematic of maybe why, of the idea that we're not so far apart as we might think, which is why sometimes...
By the way, we're getting close to where...
I know, 5:36. I'm checking my time. Yeah. Could we, you want to leave this idea for next time?
Well, I think that we probably, knowing us, the two of us,
yes,
that it's not going to be something we can put to rest, in the next 5 or 10 minutes.
I'm going to write down where we were so I don't forget. Because when I'm this tired, it's very likely I will probably, it's just not true. I often think about our discussions routinely, almost daily throughout my week. Mm-hmm. It's just that the line of thinking that I go through, I forget about what we originally talked about. Mm-hmm. So I got to write it down this time. Mm-hmm. I am going to, this week, I'm going to refine this claim that I'm making regarding the importance of subject-object differentiation and how it applies, how an empiricist, which is what I would call you, and a solipsist are using them. And I think when we go through this, if I can present it properly in a way that you can kind of see what I'm saying, I really believe at the end of the day, you're going to say, oh, well, except for this one slight twist in my thinking or your thinking, we really pretty much believe, we actually experience and believe things very similarly. There's one slight twist in a solipsist point of view. And it has to do with the definition of existence.
Okay. So I believe that my belief system is more optimal than yours and more what I should believe to accomplish my ultimate ethical principle, making the world a better place within my sphere of influence. And that is that I believe that other people exist besides myself, even when I'm not thinking about them.
That's interesting. See, I think that The exact opposite. I think that in the aggregate, a person who believes in an empiricist point of view, who is not solipsist, is way, 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 way more inclined towards injury, towards self, others, and everything. They are inclined to behave in ways which are self-destructive and destructive in general.
Well, I believe that I'm a hominid, just like my fellow humans, and we are indeed inclined to cause all sorts of stuff that causes pain, suffering, disability, and early death.
But I said more inclined. I think you are more inclined to do PSDED if you're an empiricist than if you're a solipsist. By far more inclined.
And solipsist, a solipsist is one who says, I am the only one that exists, and that in my subjective experience, then things appear and disappear. And I say that they only exist when they have appeared, but they no longer exist when they disappear.
I could go very, very quickly why solipsist that is not an accurate definition of solipsist. That might be a more accurate definition of what I believe, but don't equate what I believe to a solipsist position. I'm saying
what you believe.
Mine is an extreme solipsist position.
I know that what you're saying is that the solipsist is not maintaining that position that you're maintaining, but is saying that there's no way of being certain one way or the other as to whether yours is right or mine is right.
Right. But I think the exact opposite. I think a position that somebody takes that there is existence outside your subjective experience, amongst other things, leads to an overconfidence somebody has in their own position, leads to them to take on beliefs that lead to dominant behaviors, and encourages them to, very often, I could point to Hitler and lots of other leaders, to do massive, massive, massive injury.
Yeah, well, I have other explanations for that. But at any rate.
Yes, let's do your exercise, just enjoy. Same time next week?
Yes.
Very good. Thanks, Bill. Very good, Bill. I'll see you later.
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.